there's been this intense battle in the city of Bakhmut. And I wanted to ask you, because the Western mainstream media has been kind of sounding the alarm a bit. You've had places like The Guardian, the New York Times talk about how Ukraine has been using artillery and all sorts of weapons at alarming rates, to the point where it seems like they're admitting that Ukraine is outgunned here. And I wanted to ask you, what is your assessment of the situation right now on the ground in Bakhmut and going forward as we enter this winter phase of this proxy war going on in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, let's understand that the battle for Bakhmut has been taking place for many, many months now. This is not a new phenomenon. Bakhmut is the Gordian knot of the Ukrainian defensive belt that exists in Donetsk, a defensive belt that has been constructed on a continuous basis since 2014. It's one of the most extensive, fortified defense systems in modern history. It is manned with troops. It has the support of heavy equipment, artillery, etc. And the Russians have been in the business of grinding it down for many weeks. And what we see right now is basically we're reaching the culmination of all the Russian effort. I always laugh when people say, how could Ukraine be outgunned? I don't know. Maybe because they only have X number of artillery pieces and the Russians have X times 10. Simple Marine math. I mean, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not somebody with a PhD in calculations. But I know that when I have more artillery pieces than you, I'm going to win that fight, generally speaking, especially if it's positional warfare, where you've made it really easy for me by sitting in your positions that I can identify using my intelligence resources and pound you into submission. This fight has there's two aspects to this fight. One is that the Russians are more than happy to let the Ukrainians sit in place and suffer casualties. Oftentimes, the Ukrainian battalion will rotate into the front lines and a matter of days later rotate out, suffering 60% casualties without ever having seen a Russian. So they just show up and they die, and then they leave, and another battalion comes in. And that's the thing: the Ukrainians are, rotating battalions. It's every once in a while the Ukrainians will, fail to rotate in on time, leave some sort of chink in their armor, and if that time is right, then the Russians will carry out an assault on that position. This is extraordinarily bloody combat, close quarters combat of the most intimate nature. Face to face in a trench, hand grenades, knives, bayonets, rifle stocks, bullets at close range, and the Russians tend to prevail, seize the position, and then they wait and they start the process of grinding down the next position. The goal of the Russians, of course, is to kill as many Ukrainians as possible. And fortunately for Russia, Ukraine is giving them plenty of opportunity to do just this by their tactics. One has to wonder, at what point in time the Ukrainians will recognize that the price of holding on to Bakhmut is too high, that Ukraine would be better off preserving these forces, some of whom are well trained, and using them as a mobile defense, capable of at least lowering the casualty ratio. Right now, Russia's enjoying an 8 to 10 to 1 casualty ratio, primarily because Russia can exploit its artillery advantage. Even when Ukraine has modern Western artillery, such as the M777 from the United States, the HIMARS, other artillery systems from other NATO countries, they don't exist in sufficient quantity to level the battlefield. Ukraine is, on occasion, able to score an impressive hit on a command and control facility. Let's not pretend the Ukrainians can't fight. They can. Let's not pretend the Ukrainians aren't lethal. They are. When we speak of a 10 to 1 casualty ratio, understand that if we're saying that Ukraine is suffering 500 to 800 casualties a day, that means Russia's suffering 50 to 80 casualties a day. During the Vietnam War, at the height of the Vietnam War, the United States was suffering around 200 lethalities a week, and we considered that to be, a difficult pill for us to swallow. So the Russians are suffering greater losses than we suffered at the height of the Vietnam War. So let's not pretend that Russia's getting away from this conflict, injury-free. They're paying a tremendous price. If we say, for instance, that the Ukrainians have suffered over 100,000 dead, which I actually believe the number is probably double that, that means that the Russians have suffered 20,000 dead. That's a lot of dead. So let's, even though we say that Russia has the advantage, it's a meat grinder, understand that it's grinding up Russian meat as well. But Bakhmut is about to fall. When it does, the Russians will have achieved a strategic victory of some importance. They will have broken through the defensive belt that the Ukrainians have constructed in the Donetsk Republic, and they will be able to roll up the Ukrainian defensive lines. And here's the important part: they have 150,000 troops finalizing their training who are going to show up. That's 10 to 15 division equivalents, show up with the most modern equipment that Russia has in its inventory: the T-90 tank, the T-80 tank, the advanced versions of the T-72 tank, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, etc. And they will be able to exploit the situation. So I think the Ukrainians are in for a very, very difficult period of time going forward, and that the Russian pressure will be relentless, and it will not end until Russia has achieved its stated objectives in the special military operation.
Yeah, I want to kick it to you, Dan, with a question that Scott definitely afterward, please jump in. But I wanted to ask you, Dan, about your impression of this meeting that just happened between Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Right, he was flown in by the Pentagon. There was a lot made about it in the U.S. and Western mainstream media. You had Joe Biden say, well, during the press conference with Zelensky, say, well, Ukraine can't get all of the weapons that it wants because NATO doesn't want World War III with Russia. And then there's been all this talk about Patriot missiles, and we know that $45 billion more was just passed for Ukraine in the next year in this omnibus bill. What do you think is the significance of this? What was your impression of this visit, given that so much was made about it in the media?
Well, I think it was interesting. It was mixed. I mean, in the sense that the optics were certainly that Zelensky got this hero's welcome. He was compared, of course, to Winston Churchill, who visited the White House during World War II. Of course, Churchill happened to be fighting the Nazis, and Zelensky's on the side of the Nazis. But in any case, but he was given a hero's welcome here by the president in Congress and by the media, of course. But that was also accompanied by really a lack of material support that he's going to go home with, right? He wanted a lot more than what he got. He got one, and Scott, you can finish this because I don't know the correct word, but he got one Patriot missile something. I don't know what that. What's that?
Battery.
Thank you. He wanted much more. He wanted artillery. He wanted more than one Patriot missile battery. So all the hype, all the pomp and circumstance seems to be dwarfed by the fact that he didn't get much. And it seems to me that that's a signal that maybe Ukraine fatigue is sinking in. And by the way, I hope that's the case. It should have sunk in a long time ago. I think we need to stop funding this effort because I think it's, by the way, futile. It's just going to lead to the death of more Ukrainians and Russians as well. But in any case, that is my takeaway, that despite all the appearances, the U.S. largely said no to this guy and sent him on his way. And to me, that's the takeaway.
Yeah, Scott, do you want to jump in about what you thought about this visit?
It was a made-for-TV moment. Hollywood couldn't have written a better script. The brave Ukrainian president visiting the frontline troops, ostensibly in Bakhmut, but we don't know because we didn't hear any artillery fire in the background, and allegedly Bakhmut's being struck by an artillery shell every minute. But he awarded medals to the brave heroes of Bakhmut, one of whom gave his medal back to Zelensky and begged that he give it to the president of the United States. Then they all bravely signed a flag that Zelensky brought, and of course he brought it with him to the session of joint session of Congress, and he gave it to Speaker Pelosi with much fanfare. I mean, my God, it couldn't have gotten any more dramatic than this. Nancy Pelosi said it was the greatest speech ever delivered before the House of Representatives. The greatest speech ever delivered before the House. I will tell you this right now. For the greatest speech that was ever delivered, I don't think Nancy Pelosi could tell me right now one line from that speech. It was the most forgettable speech ever delivered before the House of Representatives. In fact, it's a speech that will have been forgotten in the House of Representatives this time next week, this time next month, as reality steps in. Zelensky didn't come here to be anything more than window dressing for a domestic political moment. You see, we have a lame duck Congress, and they're being asked to push through a $45 billion defense expenditure package that normally would be reserved for next year, the next Congress. They don't need the money now. There's already money that's allocated. This is money that's going to be used for next year. Why don't they wait till next year? Because there's Republicans taking over the House of Representatives who might start, or probably will start, asking some very uncomfortable questions, such as, hey, where does all this go? What have you done with the stuff we've already given you? You say you want more, but how do we know what we've already sent you hasn't been siphoned off into the pocket of people or into the black market coming back? We'd like some accountability. This would be a very difficult discussion for the Biden administration because they don't have answers, because they've refused to appoint an inspector general. They don't have any accounting procedure. Right now, they are going through the motions of sending so-called on-site inspectors on the ground in Ukraine to investigate the status of the weapons that have been sent in, trying to build from scratch a documentary record that should have existed in any normal way of doing business. Just telling you right now, when the U.S. provides weapons to another nation, we document this. There's our receipts signed. There are barcodes on many of these weapons, and we track them to make sure that they're used in accordance with the legal framework that has been built into whatever agreement that's been put in. With Ukraine, we've given them carte blanche. They can do anything they want, no accountability. And as a result, much of these weapons aren't making it to the front line, especially the lighter weapons, the javelins, the stingers, the machine guns, the grenades, the mines, the explosives. They're being siphoned off. It's sort of like, back in the good old days in New Jersey and New York, when the shipment of the newest Adidas came in at the port, and they load them in the truck, and oh my gosh, a couple boxes bounced out of the truck on the way to the store. Well, they bounced out of the truck into the back trunk of somebody who drove off and then would sell them on the side. This is what's happening. We literally have mercenaries saying, we're in a convoy, and 2 trucks at the end of the convoy peeled off and disappeared. They were full of munitions and weapons, but they just went their own way instead of going to the front lines. So Biden and the proponents of this conflict don't want to answer those questions. So they're using this lame duck session to push through a $45 billion spending bill, which, by the way, is going to pass no matter what. There was no question that this wasn't going to pass. So what is Zelensky's purpose? Zelensky's purpose is to provide political cover for this vote. Because now Zelensky has come in and he's begged, he's pleaded. Okay, but the joke is on him and on everybody else, because Zelensky went off script. He wasn't supposed to, but he did. He was just supposed to come in and say, yes, give me some help, da-da-da. Oh, $45 billion, thank you very much. Slava Ukraina, Slava America. But no, Zelensky had the gall to say, Patriots, I'd like a second battery, please. We're sort of out of tanks. I'd like your tanks, the M1 Abrams. I'd really like some of those. I'd like some of your Bradley fighting vehicles. I'd like some of the equipment that we need if you want us to win this war. Because you do want us to win this war, don't you? This is all about, right? You want us to do the fighting to win the conflict against Russia that you've provoked and you're promoting. So you're going to help me win this war, are you not? And Joe Biden's answer was no. We're not going to help you win this war. You're not going to win this war. You're going to lose this war. And it's not just Joe Biden saying that. Remember, General Zelensky, who's the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, gave an interview to The Economist last week where he all but admitted the war is lost. He didn't come straight out. He did it indirectly. But the interesting thing is the interview that he gave, Zelensky was at the table. The commander-in-chief, the president, didn't say a single word. Just sat there as the general took over, which tells you something about who's really in charge right now. But the general said, I can beat these guys, meaning the Russians. I can beat them. Well, every general says that. No general gets his stars by saying, I can't beat them. He said, I can beat them, but I'm going to need 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery tubes, and an endless amount of ammunition. In short, he basically was replicating the scene out of the movie Downfall in the basement in Berlin with Adolf Hitler and his generals. If you've ever seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, see it. It's brilliant. But Hitler's sitting there and, he's pounding the table, moving imaginary armies. Where's Steiner? Where's Wendt? Why aren't they attacking? Why aren't they doing this? If they would just listen to me, we would win this war. Well, there weren't any armies. It was imaginary that he was pushing around. There was nothing left. And Zelensky's at that point. Give me this huge army. And we're talking a lot of equipment here. And I can win this war. Well, hey, General, I could win this war if you gave me that army. Danny, you could win the war. Dan, you could win. All of us could win this war if we were just given the imaginary army that General Zelensky was imagining. But then Zelensky was doing this for a reason. Because then he said, the Russians, they're not that bad. They're actually pretty good. And they've got this mobilization going on, and they're going to be ready pretty soon to start carrying out offensive operations. And if I don't have the things I've asked for, there's not much I can do. The Russians are going to win. And there was the dime, dropped right on the table. The Russians are going to win. And that was the cover. Basically, hey, the West, you got us all ginned up here. Now it's time for you to step up to the table. I need this army to do the job that you want us to do. Without this army, they're going to beat me. So Zelensky came here and he said, I heard Zelensky ask for stuff, so I'm going to ask for it. And Biden said, no. What does this mean? Because here's the important thing. We know Ukraine is going to lose this war. We know it. I mean, General Petraeus can get on TV and spout nonsense. General Hertling, all these retired generals with 1 million stars. I mean, there might as well be a galaxy up there with all the stars that appear on TV. And they can all say the same thing, how bad the Russians are, how brave the Ukrainians are. And you know what? It is bunk, 100% bunk. The Ukrainians have lost this war. They're losing this war, and there's no way they can win this war. And Joe Biden recognizes this, and that's why he said, you're not going to get the help you've asked for because we don't want to put you in a position where we escalate this conflict to the point of a NATO-Russian direct conflict. We can't have that. So you're not going to win. You can't win. We're not going to allow you to win. Think about it. The Patriot missile battery that we're sending takes 5 months minimum to train up a Patriot missile operator. Okay. Let's say we start now. We're not. It's going to take a little bit of time. That means they're not going to get one till May. I happen to believe that a lot's going to happen on the ground between now and May, and none of it's going to be good for Ukraine. And so this war may be over or on the verge of being over by the time the Patriot comes in. Why do the Ukrainians need the Patriot missile? Because right now, their critical infrastructure is being eviscerated by daily Russian missile attacks that their current air defense system can't shoot down. So what is our solution? To give them one battery of Patriot missiles that don't work, by the way. Check the operational history of this system. Couldn't shoot down an Iraqi Scud, shot down more Allied aircraft than Iraqi missiles in 2003. It couldn't protect the strategic infrastructure of Saudi Arabia. The system don't work. But we're going to give one battery, and it's going to be deployed in May. What's that say to the Ukrainians? We can't stop the Russians from destroying your infrastructure. Not only can we not, we're not going to stop. So Ukraine's going to get eviscerated for 5 months. The system where they were going to bring in is incapable of solving the issue under the best of circumstances. It's not enough. It doesn't work. And frankly speaking, every Ukrainian who's manning it, you're going to die. I'm telling this right now to any Ukrainian soldier watching this. Don't accept the assignment to go get trained in Germany. Yes, you'll get beer. Yes, the women are pretty. Yes, it's going to be warm, but you're going to die. When you go back to Ukraine, they're going to put you in a death trap called a Patriot missile battery that is the biggest target Russia's looking for, and they will kill you, and they will kill everything about you. Don't do it. But this should be said to every Ukrainian soldier right now, because what has the United States said? We are abandoning you. We are literally acting out on Lindsey Graham's perverted little fantasy that we are going to fight to the last Ukrainian. He said that. I'm not making it up. He said that. So now we have Ukraine trying to fight, trying to win, trying to do something, and we're not going to let them. All we want them to do is to fight to the last Ukrainian. For what purpose? To bring as much harm to Russia as possible. I don't know how to better define literally what evil is. Evil is the American policy towards Ukraine, because it's not about doing good. It's not about good defeating evil. It's not about helping anybody. It's simply about allowing a nation to die. And it's not Russia that's dying. Allowing a nation we ostensibly call our friends to die the most horrific death. The U.S. policy towards Ukraine is the definition of evil. And those who are implementing it are evil people.